Hello, I am live here on YouTube, only nobody even knows that I am here because I just decided to come on spur of the moment. So I take on board it's going to take everybody else a few minutes to get here, but I thought I would pop on for a quick question and answer session and kind of give a talk and a chat about a few things here and there. Don't mind me, I'm just copying and pasting to Facebook and everything so everybody will know I'm here. So I don't have to keep talking to myself for a long period of time. You see, that's what happens when you decide to do this spur of the moment. But sometimes I have an extra moment and I just go, gee, you know what? I'm really bored and I want to do something. And so I recognize I haven't been live on YouTube in a really long period of time. So here I am for an astrology question and answer session where you can all feel free to post your questions over there in the window. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking to myself for a really long period of time, and that's not a lot of fun. And I can see some of you are here already. Wow, how did you find out so quickly that I was here? That's amazing. Or at least it shows that a lot of you are here, but everybody's really quiet now. So I'm going to refresh the page. Wow, I hear myself talking. Well, there we go. That's no fun. Okay. All right. So if anybody has any general astrology questions, now's a good time to ask. Wearing my headset tonight because I sometimes get into the habit of talking a little too loudly, and the next thing you know, I've lost my voice. So, hello, Sarah. How are you? So, while we're waiting for everybody to kind of get here, first of all, there's a solar eclipse today. It's a partial solar eclipse. It's only visible in Antarctica, but boy, I'm definitely feeling the energy. Don't know about anybody and everybody else, but man, it's intense. Also, on just another note, for those of you who aren't familiar, if you wish to schedule an astrological consultation with me, you can do so through my astrological services link at AuthenticAstrology.com. You'll see it up in the window if you go to AuthenticAstrology.com. Also, two upcoming courses starting in March. A foundation level course teaching the fundamentals of Vedic astrology. You can register either by trimester for a trimesterly payment of, I believe it's $329, or you can register by payment in full. I forget, believe it or not, what the payment in full price is, but it's all also on the courses page of my website. And there's also a new Nakshatra course that starts next month as well. So please feel free to visit the courses page on my website as well. Okay. What does K2 transiting over natal Rahu indicate? Well, when you have those nodal transits, they generally mark a karmic crossroads for the individual. When you have K2 going over Rahu, to give a simple explanation, basically what is happening, if you think about your natal Rahu and what your natal Rahu is doing, your natal Rahu is confronting you with all those things that you may or may not be that familiar with. And if you are familiar with them, you're only a tad familiar with it. And it's those things that you very deeply need to work on. So with K2 there, it's kind of, putting you in this period of, I'm kind of making a symbol for it, where you go, okay, well, do I keep going on this way or do I retreat back to something that felt more familiar to me? It also gives an opportunity for integration at those periods of times and kind of reflecting back on where you've been and where you feel like you're going and trying to find the best balance between those things. That's if you approach it with awareness. If not, it can sometimes feel confusing. When you have K2 over K2 and you have Rahu over Rahu, then basically that generally marks a pretty prominent shift forward on the individual karmic path. Okay. Did I get that car? No, but I bought my son a small toy version of it. I wasn't really going to get that car, right? That's way out of my budget. Okay. All right, let's see what we've got here in our questions section. Rahu and Ketu in each other's nakshatras. People ask common questions like that a lot of times, and people often ask about planets in each other's nakshatras. While there can definitely be powerful energy between planets that are in each other's nakshatras, it doesn't necessarily translate into those planets being supportive of each other. And nakshatras function differently than rashis do. They're a different concept. Rashis you can think of as a field where something happens. That's why Rashis can also be translated into houses and focused on specific areas of an individual's life, whereas nakshatras tend to indicate how we're growing something. We're growing it along certain lines, like we might be growing it in a Bharani way, which can bring some difficulty, but maybe that difficulty is productive for us, right? So nakshatras are a little bit different. So when they are in each other's, when planets are in each other's nakshatras, they influence each other. And there's a very deep connection between those planets, but it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, this is good, right? Because one of those planets might be weak. One of those planets might be creating some difficulty in the horoscope. And you have to think of all of those factors at the same time. So it's not as simple of a thing of going into, Rahu and Ketu's nakshatra and Ketu and Rahu's nakshatra, because you have to consider where that's all playing out in the individual's life, right? Different Varga charts, it will produce different things. Okay. So let's see what other questions we've got going on here. And that's why I don't want to go much deeper than that with Rahu and Ketu and each other's nakshatras. But, really on a certain level too, you have to remember that what the planets are actually doing in association with the nakshatras is a different concept than, say, what Rashi lords are doing, right? Because basically, the reason that planets are connected with nakshatras in the first place is so one can determine dasha rulership during particular dasha periods. If you work with dashas other than Vimshotri dasha, you'll actually find that quite often there are different planets connected to the nakshatras. So, what's more important with the nakshatras than the planets are the deities that are connected to it. That being the case, though, we can think of the planets as acting like messengers for the deities. And you will find that basically how a nakshatra is influenced is determined by the planetary association of the planetary ruler of that nakshatra. Right? So, in other words, if Venus is weak and a person has a planet in Bharani Nakshatra, that can create some difficulty, especially during prominent Venus periods, subdashas, things along those lines, right? But the planets are not really functioning in the same way that they do in the Rashis. And that's something that I think a lot of people tend to miss somehow. Okay. All right, let's see what we've got going on. So somebody asks a question that quite often I get questions like this, and I'll tell you why I don't go too deeply into it. Somebody said, thoughts on today's solar eclipse, exact natal Rahu. Well, I don't know where Rahu is in all of your Varga charts, which I would really need the entire horoscope. And so the reason I don't go into things like that is because I would be just giving generalizations. And giving generalizations in terms of astrology is actually kind of dangerous, because then people start believing things that may or may not come to fruition. Whereas if we have the person's horoscope in front of us, it's a lot clearer. And that being the case, if you would like to schedule a consultation with me, there is a link, I think, up above in this video where you see the little eye. And if there's not a link there, then you can just also go to my website, AuthenticAstrology.com, and schedule a consultation through the services page. Okay. So somebody's asking, what is the effect of having Rahu Ketu axis with another person? Like if your sun is conjunct at almost same degree someone else's Ketu when charts are superimposed. Well, when there are karmic connections between the nodes and another planet, what that planet rules in your own individual chart. So let's say, for instance, it's your sun over the person's K2. And let's say your sun rules the fifth house in your chart. Something about your children, something about your children is a important karmic factor for the individual and likely stirs up karmic memories for the individual if it's conjunct K2. If it's conjunct Rahu, then that's likely your children or your creative expression, things along those lines are likely things that help the individual to grow their karmic path. So basically, when there is a planet from one person's chart conjuncting one of the nodes in another person's chart, it is a very powerful karmic connection. When the nodes conjunct each other, that's also a very prominent karmic connection. Equally, if somebody has their K2 conjuncting your sun, then wherever their K2 is placed is an important skill that they have that they can quite likely help you with in terms of helping whatever your sun rules in the chart, right? So that's how that works. Okay. So let's see what we've got going on. Somebody asked, what is the difference between a solar eclipse on Rahu versus on Ketu? Well, you have to think about what the nodes are doing, what each individually does. Ketu tends to relate to those things that we are familiar with, those things that we know because we've done them for several different lifetimes. But we can be familiar with being in a confined space for 24 hours a day. Just because it's familiar, it doesn't mean it's enjoyable. So Rahu's job is to pull us out of the familiar, confront us with some things that are a little bit foreign or unknown to us so that we begin to expand upon our evolutionary path. So if you have an eclipse that's closer to K2, it may not feel quite as odd, scary, or disconcerting. It might even have a tone somewhat of the, gee, I've been down this particular path before, and I've been over this several times, and I might be working on a different aspect of it, but a lot of this seems familiar. Whereas the eclipses that happen conjuncting Rahu, they tend to have connotations of things that are confusing to us a lot more, right? So many times people tend to say that eclipses that are conjunct K2 are not always as difficult as eclipses that are conjunct Rahu. Okay. So could it be that when Rahu and Ketu return back to the natal position after 18 and a half years, could that be that something similar happens? No, the same thing never always happens because you'll be in a different dasha period, right? And so that's something to understand. Things are different because different dasha periods are bringing different karma to the surface. You might be reviewing something from that time, a long time ago, but it doesn't always mean that the same thing is going to happen. Same thing is never happening. We might have similar things happen, but we're always going to be associating with them differently. And that's how astrology works with dasha periods. That's why when people get really, what's the phrase I want to use, attached to thinking that a particular transit is going to bring a certain thing based just upon the planets that are getting triggered, they're only seeing a very minute portion of the picture because you always have to take it in context of the dashas. Okay. Can I describe sun ascendant in Ashlesha Nakshatra? On one level, that's hard to do because a lot of it would relate to how weak Mercury is in the horoscope. It would relate to the strength of the sun. It would relate to the Lagna Lord. So again, this is why I don't usually go into things along those lines because it's really just a vast generalization that I'm giving. I don't like to generally give vast generalizations, right? So, if you have a strong sun in Ashlesha Nakshatra and you have a strong Mercury, it can give the capacity to very deeply discover your potential. If you have a weak sun, there can be a weak sense of self-assurance. And if you've got a weak Mercury, the individual can get sucked into a lot of confusing circumstances that they get hypnotized by that they can't really extract themselves from. So if you can see, those are two very vastly different concepts that we're looking at. And that's why it's really kind of hard to judge just based upon one particular factor in the horoscope. Okay. What does it mean when Rahu and Ketu switch houses from birth chart to the Navamsha? Like Ketu in 12th, Rahu in 6th, Rahu in 12th, and Ketu in the 6th. Well, it's not just with the Navamsha, but it can happen with the Shastiyamsha chart too, and a lot of different charts. Basically, Varga charts have to be taken in context of what they're about. The Rashi chart marks the life path of the individual, right? It's what the individual is focusing on the path to becoming themselves. It's probably the easiest way to put it. The Navamsha chart relates to the meaning that the individual finds upon that path, the purpose that they find upon that path, right? So basically, things that are Navamsha related are purpose filled, or perhaps the individual feels a lack of purpose in it, dependent upon the position. So if you've got that going on between the Rashi chart and the Navamsha chart, then something that is happening in terms of what an individual finds purpose in. So let's say K2 is in one sign in the Navamsha chart. Let's say it happens to be in Aquarius, and then Rahu is in Aquarius in the Rashi chart. Well, the individual likely found a sense of purpose in Aquarian related things in previous lifetimes, if there's a strong Saturn there. And in this lifetime, they're developing those things further on the path to becoming themselves. Varga charts all mean several different things. We become really accustomed to the Navamsha being connected to the soul, but it's so much deeper than that. That's only scratching the surface. All charts are related to the soul on one level. It's just different aspects of it. But generally, when you have the nodes switching signs, especially through the Shastiyamsha to the Rashi chart, then that tends to indicate a karmic path that the individual has worked on before, and they're bringing it into deeper integration in this particular lifetime. Okay. Solar eclipses on K2, the reason people say solar eclipses on K2 can bring endings is because K2 is bringing a sense of completion to something. New moons in Vedic astrology don't focus the same way that they do in Western astrology, and I think that's where a lot of people get confused. Okay. Do Rahu and Ketu have debilitation and exaltation signs? That's something that a lot of people get into discussions about, very deep discussions about. And number one, I don't believe they actually have debilitation and exaltation, because Rahu and Ketu don't have a concrete presence in the material world. They're basically points that create shadows. They create a physical manifestation that we see in eclipses, but they don't have a physical form. The rest of the planets do have a physical form, so then therefore, in terms of Rashis, which tend to relate to fields of life and are then further defined into houses, Rashis tend to need something that's a little more concrete in terms of exaltation, rulership, debilitation, etc. Right? So in my philosophy, I don't believe that they have debilitation and exaltation. I have seen generally, and I state generally in quotation marks, that K2 tends to function, if there's a strong Mars, very well within Scorpio, and Rahu, if there's a strong Venus, within Taurus. But, if you've got a weak Mars and you've got a weak Venus, then you can't really say, oh, K2's exalted in Scorpio and Rahu's exalted in Taurus, because if their dispositors are, afflicted, it's not going to feel that way. So it doesn't always work that way. It's probably the easiest way to say it. Okay, so just a reminder, just again, briefly, I do have 2 upcoming courses that start next month. One is a fundamentals course. You don't have to pay for that course in full. If you don't want to pay in full at the beginning, you can pay by trimester, which is like $329 per trimester. That starts mid-March. The other is a nakshatra course, which I believe starts on the 24th. And it's the same with that. You can either register by paying in full or by paying by trimester. Okay, let's take some more questions. I've got 10 minutes. I'm only on for a short bit tonight. Okay. So just so people know, I'm just to be clear, somebody says Libra ascendant, Jupiter in Hasta Nakshatra with Saturn and Moon in 12th house. What is the effect on Jupiter Mahadasha? That is a very general thing because we don't know the strength of Saturn. We don't know the strength of the Moon. Just saying that they're in the 12th house does not necessarily mean that it's going to create tons of hardship for that planet. That is a difficult placement for Saturn, and it is a difficult placement for the Moon, but we're not going to get a clear picture of what Jupiter Mahadasha would create just by looking at those particular things. Things like that, we need to look at the full horoscope for, right? I don't really see much help or assistance in giving general chart interpretations based upon a few planetary positions because it generally tends to create inaccurate or incomplete results, which is why I don't really do that a lot of the time. Okay. There are some rare instances where I do it because it's possible to give some clarity, but I don't tend to do it very often. Okay, so let's see some more astrologically related questions. How to find out what your life purpose is when you analyze Rahu in Virgo for second house for Western astrology and Rahu in Leo, third house for Vedic astrology. I don't tend to view just solely Rahu's path as bringing the life purpose. I go through a very long analysis involving the Atmakaraka, influences to the Atmakaraka, position of the Atmakaraka, and planets that join it in the Navamsha, in the Shastyamsha, all sorts of things in order to determine life purpose. Also finding Brigu Bindu, which is the midway point between Rahu and the Moon, is also something that can help to guide you in a stronger direction. You can find lots of information about how to find that out online. That would give you stronger information looking for Brigu Bindu than would analyzing Rahu in terms of determining life purpose. Rahu generally determines how we're bringing completion to Ketu in this life. It doesn't necessarily determine purpose or destiny. It determines what our dark areas are and what we're needing to work out, right? So those are two different things. I don't know if that's what you meant, and so that's why I, kind of gave a roundabout answer. Karmic significance of Rahu and Saturn in the 12th house. Well, I can say one thing on a certain level. It's hard to say what the karmic significance of Rahu in Saturn in the 12th house would be without the full horoscope. But generally, and I state generally, when you have Ketu in the 6th, it tends to create a scenario where the individual has the mindset that if they put a lot of effort and energy into something, it's going to produce a lot of results. Because maybe they've had that happen once or twice, but it doesn't always do that. And so then the individual finds themselves in a repetitive cycle of putting energy into something and wondering why nothing is happening. And then they get frustrated and they start looking for an escape. Right. Also, Rahu in 12 positions tend to denote a path this lifetime that involves a certain degree of solitude for the individual, or space, retreat, things along those lines. But that's just general, right? I would need to look at the position of Rahu's dispositor from Rahu and the position of Ketu's dispositor from Ketu. along with a lot of other factors to really understand the karmic significance of that. But I do offer a karmic analysis consultation through my website if you want to go to the astrological services page. You can book that. Okay. Dispositors of the nodes conjunct in the eighth house. Pardon me for the cough there. That can be a bit of a topsy-turvy experience, right? Because the moment the individual, that was a good question, the person who came up with that, the moment the individual thinks that they have the nodal cycle figured out is the moment that they find that they don't have it figured out. But that's okay, because the individual is going to have some familiarity with the snafu approach, which is, if you don't know what that means situation normal, all beep up, so to speak, right? So the individual is used to things being confusing and things being a little bit topsy-turvy. So on one level, they're used to walking a more mystical path in general. All right, I'm only here for another 5 minutes, and then I'm going to have to go on this in. Okay. So I have time for maybe one more question before we move on. Okay. All right. I tell you what, everybody, I'm going to cut it short tonight. I'm beginning to kind of lose my throat. Maybe we can do this again sometime soon. So just a reminder, my astrological services page at authenticastrology.com slash astrological services, or you can just go to authenticastrology.com and look for the services link. In addition, 2 upcoming courses next month that you can register for. One, a fundamentals course, and the other is a nakshatra course. Until next time, I will talk to everybody soon. Have a happy eclipse. Bye now.